Hello and welcome to the Coffee and Heroes podcast. Your host is always Alan, joined this evening by Mr. Keith Miller, as always.
And I'm glad to be here, as always.
And this is no mere reviews podcast. This is no mere previews podcast. It's been a while since we've done one of these. We are back with a book club.
Oh my. And how long is it exactly since we've done a book club?
Well, we looked back on the feed, and it's ironic that our last book club was Captain America Winter Soldier, both a movie and a comic book.
It was kind of a comparison, wasn't it?
It was a comparison between the two, and it's quite ironic that we're choosing to do this now, given that I'm halfway through the Captain America Brubaker run, and I just watched Winter Soldier
so
last
5 years later.
5 years later.
You're actually reading... Well, I mean, you read at that time, the
Winter Soldier arc that we covered, but I'm reading the entirety of that 5 omnibus long, multi-year, multifaceted epic.
What a run it was. I mean, it's great to see, you know, there's so much down on, there's a lot of different reviewers who are a wee bit down on, as they call them, modern creators, you know, and I mean, to me, Brubaker's run on Captain America is a classic run.
Yeah.
You know, regardless of the fact it's by a modern creator.
Is Brubaker considered a modern creator now, though?
Well, you know...
This is an interesting way to start this pod, by the way.
Absolutely, 100%. It's probably not the conversation we should get into now, because this could run for a long time. But, I mean, certainly he's not Silver Age, not Golden Age, not Bronze Age. I would... The only other age
he's an elder statesman of modern, maybe.
An elder statesman of modern comic books, yeah, absolutely, but still a modern creator. Well,
we're going to be talking about another elder statesman of, I would say, modern comic books, because again, not quite Golden Age, not quite Silver Age. And it's interesting that we start this podcast off talking about Captain America, given he is nowhere near this book.
Yeah, nowhere near it. Don't see him in it, but we should. It's been so long since we had one of the. So, if you're a regular listener to the Coffee and Heroes podcast, which we hope you are,
and we thank you for it,
we do. Generally, we do our previews podcasts, which
once a month.
Will let you know what's coming out in 3 months' time. We do a reviews podcast, which lets you know certainly our preferences or our favourite things of what have come out the month before. And we're really lucky enough, given the accessibility of creators, you know, in the industry in which, you know, we're lucky enough to live in, that we do interviews. And we always appreciate how giving those writers and artists are of their time. But we also like to look back at runs or books or series that we particularly enjoy. And this is one of those, and that's why we call it a book club.
Yeah, and I think part of it is as well, we're into a nice settled routine. I think recently we're trying to, you may have noticed, maybe you haven't, but we're trying our best to release content on a Sunday. We're trying the best to keep it nice and consistent. And so you need some, maybe a variety of shows to make sure you've got weekly content. Because as you say, previews and reviews are monthly shows. And again, interviews is a good one as well. So we have been talking for years about doing book clubs again. Absolutely. To the point where we've even talked about we'll have guests on.
Which we will.
And those guests have already picked books they want to do.
Which they have.
So we definitely will get to those as well, guys. But we just wanted to get back into the routine, certainly with the two of us. And play around with this format. And I thought with this is a choice from myself, I should say.
Actually, can I just disagree with you there?
Oh, by all means.
I almost feel like this is a choice from one of our buddies, Stephen. We were in the store the other week, and we were talking about this and blah, 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 and he mentioned Daredevil. He mentioned...
Spoiler, Keith, what book we're talking about.
He mentioned this particular book.
That's fair, actually,
let me credit that particular gentleman with this particular choice.
And this is our way of testing if he listens, because we'll see if he mentions the shout out. But yeah, one of the reasons we went with this book, I mean, it's a good time, certainly, because you've got Daredevil Born Again coming on to Disney Plus, which, despite being the self-confessed massive Daredevil fan, love the Netflix series.
I mean, I
still haven't started it, but I have no doubt when I start it, I will burn through it.
You haven't watched the series yet. I'm 3 episodes in.
And I think 4 dropped today, was it?
4 dropped today. I'm hoping that I might get a chance to watch the 4th episode tonight, depending on how excited we get during this podcast.
That's a fair point. And as well as that series dropping, of course, there was a new printing of this book dropped recently.
There was.
This was a new release on the racks a couple of weeks ago in store.
And should always be.
It should always be. I mean, it's a book that I think should always be in print. The book we, of course, are talking about, we should probably introduce it at this point. So it is Daredevil Yellow, or Daredevil by Jeph Loeb and Tim Sale.
Which is interesting. But
it's
anyway,
a sticky point.
Before we get on to that, so this Daredevil is your favorite Marvel character?
Daredevil, I always say to people my two favorite Marvel characters, and I love the fact that they're polar opposites. One is Daredevil, the other is Silver Surfer.
Right.
The epitome of street level, the epitome of cosmic. They could not be further apart.
And which one of those is on your skin?
Well, gun to my head, Daredevil would take the crown. Daredevil would take the crown.
Right.
I don't know if it's that, maybe he's close to what Batman represents in the DC universe, human, interested in street level crime, interested in cleaning up his neighborhood, which of course would be Hell's Kitchen for Daredevil, Gotham for Batman. It lends itself to gothic artwork in the shadows, noir storytelling. So I think
now,
maybe that's
interesting. That's interesting that you're saying that, because this particular book is not necessarily all of that. So Daredevil as a character is that's how we define him now. That's how we define him, that possibly an analog to Batman. That sort of noir, that sort of dark. He's always been street level, and not argue with that. But this particular book is not that. It's not noir.
Elements of it are.
Elements are, but I mean, and I don't think we've said it yet, but this is Daredevil Yellow we're talking about. And the reason that Daredevil Yellow is called what it's called is because whenever Daredevil first started, he was in a very different costume.
He was.
He had a costume that was he was in a yellow costume. We'll go into why that is as we chat about the book. But he was also more of an analog to Spider-Man. He was more of a swashbuckler than he was a noir hero. And those two genres are very, very different, especially when you think about that particular time. You had your swashbuckling pirate heroes, the a wee bit more lighthearted, a wee bit more that's you know what I mean when I say that?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly when those characters began, I would argue that, but I would certainly say Daredevil, once you get into Miller's era and from Miller onwards, is a very dark,
big style, 100%
street level character,
which is why this is different.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly set during the early days, but I think it's maybe the word.
It's set during the first 6 issues.
Yeah, so it jumps around a little bit issue to issue, but it certainly kicks off with
it wasn't long. Daredevil wasn't in the yellow costume for long back in the day.
Yeah, they very quickly realized, hold on, Devil's in his name. But there's a reason given for that as well. But we're jumping all over the place.
Yeah, 100%. No, this is brilliant. Okay, we're excited. We're ready to go.
Yeah, one of the reasons we did pick this book, and again, tip of the hat to Stephen, but I think what's good for book clubs is this is a book that could be classified as a self-contained one and done. You could read this and never read another Daredevil book in your life and you'd be satisfied. But at the same time, I think it can serve as an eye-opening look to a character and a world with one of the deepest and richest histories in comics, I would argue.
Yeah, 100%.
So it sets itself perfectly up for that. Daredevil Yellow, it was a 6-issue Prestige miniseries.
Whenever you say Prestige, what do you mean?
So Prestige, it was cardstock cover. It was, slightly longer issue. And it was called Prestige essentially because it doesn't take place in the main run. And it brought in basically superstar creative team. It ran from July 2001 to January 2002. And as we may have mentioned already, it came from the team of writer Jeph Loeb and artist Tim Sale.
May he rest in peace.
Indeed, I had the pleasure of meeting Tim Sale a few years ago. I had the pleasure of engaging in an argument with him a few years ago.
Really?
Yeah, it was at London Comic Con, and I had a Batman Long Halloween issue with me to get signed, which ironically enough is on its way back as we speak from CGC. I got it graded and the autograph verified. But I asked him, how did it feel, that Christopher Nolan took so much from The Long Halloween for the Dark Knight movie.
Okay.
I was like, was that, nice that your work was so highly valued? And he was like, yeah, I don't like those movies. And of course, that stopped me in my tracks. But I said, oh, fair enough. Well, why is that? And he said, I don't like those Batman saving the world movies. Nuclear bombs and stuff. Oh, that's not Batman. I was like, but the Dark Knight isn't that. The Dark Knight is literally the lengths Batman has to go to stop the Joker from creating chaos. That's at its base level. So we came to a gentleman's agreement in the end.
And
we were fine.
I find that very interesting, that you had a gentleman's disagreement with Tim Sale about that particular series of movies, which is typified by, I think, a turn of phrase. Why do we fall, Bruce?
Yeah. We can learn to get ourselves back up.
And I don't know if you're aware, but I'm sure you're aware. I know you're aware. I don't know why I said that. Is that, obviously Matt's father, battling Jack Murdoch, was a boxer.
Yeah.
And at one point during this book, that's why he falls, to get back up again.
Yeah, it's the measure of a man.
Yeah, exactly.
But a little bit of a history for the book. I mean, Jeph Loeb and Tim Sale. I like to think that a lot of the best comic runs are defined by brilliant creative teams, and those creative teams are never really one and dones. Those creative teams work together many times.
That's the Coffee and Heroes motto, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Follow creators. The most famous example these days is probably Ed Brubaker, Sean Phillips.
Yep.
Always do amazing work, always work together. But, some of the ones that came to my mind, certainly, who have then worked together again, Scott Snyder, Greg Capullo, Ed Brubaker, Steve Epting, Frank Miller, David Mazzucchelli, Robert Kirkman and Ryan Ottley really came to me as well, because although Ryan Ottley didn't start Invincible, that was Cory Walker, I think of Ryan Ottley's art when I think of Invincible.
Absolutely.
And of course, a new series is coming soon in Battle Beast.
Taylor and Miller.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's just there's great creative teams, and I think these guys, Jeph Loeb and Tim Sale, are one of them. I mean, over the course of their careers, they collaborated on defining titles for Batman with Long Halloween, Superman for All Seasons, Spider-Man, Hulk, Captain America.
All of which were kind of a part of the... It's not a series, but it's almost
like the series of colors.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and arguably, which bodes well for this podcast, in my opinion, and I don't say this lightly, because the Long Halloween is like a Bible to me. For me, I think Daredevil Yellow is their best work.
Wow.
Which we will get into more, I am sure. But yeah, no, as Keith says there, I mean, when they worked at Marvel, there was this sort of line of colors. So it was Daredevil Yellow, it was Spider-Man Blue, it was Hulk Grey, and then years later they did Captain America White. But yeah, the reason
I've been struggling. I was like, what color was Captain America? Was it red or blue? For
some reason, I always think Captain America red, white, and blue.
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
I'm like, but they only use one color.
Exactly the same thing. Yeah, Hulk obviously was originally grey.
Yeah,
and Spider-Man was and Daredevil was originally yellow.
Yeah,
so that was the...
Well, essentially, these guys were brought across to Marvel in 2001. They were invited to play in the Marvel Sandbox. They were basically brought in to do what they'd already done at DC. Obviously, Long Halloween was mid-90s, 96, 97. And according to Tim Sale, I found a quote where he said that they were brought into Marvel to do, quote, tales set in the early years of these iconic characters, emphasizing the heart and sentiment as well as the dynamics and wonderful characters. It was, for me, a dream come true.
And this was the first of the color series of Marvel characters. And I mean, Jeph Loeb was he's well known both as a comic writer for us, but he's also well known as a TV series writer. He was involved in Smallville. He was involved in Lost.
And a movie writer as well. Yeah. He wrote Commando.
And Teen Wolf.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look at that.
And so, as you say, there's not a character, I don't think, Spider-Man, as you say, Batman, Superman, Hulk, Captain America, Cable, one of my personal favorites, Iron Man, Daredevil, Supergirl, The Avengers. He was a writer in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So
he's covered a lot of touchstones of geek culture.
Absolutely, he has, and continues to do so.
And I noticed you didn't mention Fantastic Four in there, but that's okay because they make an appearance in Daredevil Yellow. So he did get the right. He did get the right to Fantastic Four, and it was Jeph Loeb who came up with the concept of each of these Marvel series they were going to work on. It was going to take the form of letters from someone our heroes had lost along the way. So,
which is what makes this particular series so poignant. I think in a way, it's something slightly different anyway.
And the same with the others as well. Spider-Man Blue is from Gwen Stacy. It's to do with Gwen Stacy. It's a lovely sort of dynamic to set it up in that way. The emotion is at the heart of every story. So, but yeah, we talked a little bit at the start there about those titles. So Daredevil Yellow, Spider-Man Blue, Hulk Grey, Captain America White. I mean, I love these distinct titles and the images that they evoke. So it's a little disappointing that whoever's in charge of the new printings at Marvel, they're losing these titles a little.
I was sort of gonna wait till we talked about the format in which we read them. Maybe now's a good time.
Yeah, we could certainly do that. I mean, the reason I bring it up now is because, I like the idea to a degree. We talked about this a little before we came on. So I think we both agreed that losing these titles was a bad thing, in terms of the distinct sort of history of them. But I suppose at the same time, they are pushing the creators to the forefront because they're now coming out, as Keith said, in terms of editions. You picked up one of those new editions recently from the store.
Yep, I did. It's not the first time. Not the first time I've read it, but the edition that I picked it up in was Daredevil by Jeph Loeb and Tim Sale, and it's one of Marvel's. What do they call them? What's their I can't remember what they market this particular edition as. A gallery edition. It's
not quite. It's just basically a standard trade paperback.
Special sketchbook edition, whatever it is. But there's some bits and pieces in it. So
yeah, it's a standard trade paperback. It's not quite thick enough to be the likes of the Epic collections. Gallery editions, that's when you get into your larger format.
It is. I can't remember what they called it,
but it's not only this book, because it's already been pre-solicited, but pretty soon coming out is Jeph Loeb and Tim Sale's Spider-Man. So they are again dropping the blue from Spider-Man, and again, it's a little bit it's a minor niggle. It's a minor niggle,
absolutely. And whenever you go to the back cover and you see the quote, "The measure of a man is not how he gets knocked down on the mat, it is how he gets up."
Yeah,
it's almost. We always talk about how Marvel and DC mimic one another.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this particular one collects Daredevil Yellow 1 to 6. There's some original artwork. There's an introduction by I think it's Jeph Loeb from 2023, and there's some cool Tim Sale sort of supporting stuff at the back, which is always lovely to see, but at the end of the day, it's got the 1 to 6 in it, which is what you're after.
Yeah, that's the key thing with it. And it's interesting you talk about different editions, because I've had mine for a while. Mine is actually more of an omnibus form.
Yeah, it is lovely. It's really nice.
It is basically, you look at the spine of it, it does start with Jeph Loeb and Tim Sale, but it doesn't actually mention the characters on the spine. It is called Jeph Loeb, Tim Sale, Yellow, Blue, Grey, and White.
Brilliant.
So again, focusing more on that. But
I should also point out that I have the original.
Yeah,
first issue.
Keith pulled out the first issue of it. It's under the Marvel Knights printing, is it?
It was all under Marvel Knights, so Marvel MK, and there were 6 issues, and the issues are titled by, and the edition I have, and I don't know if it's in the edition you have, but so each book
you've got the championship
season. So championship season. So I have book 1, the championship season. Lovely cover, which is reproduced.
Though a little depressing flicking through it. The sheer volume of ads.
The adverts, but there's it gives us context as well, though.
Yeah, it gives it context certainly of what was going on in the Marvel universe at that time.
Certainly what was going on. There's a nice Juicy Fruit advert there, and there's an advert for Elektra by Brian Michael Bendis and Chuck Austin. And let me see. I think there was a Stan soapbox in here or something that.
There was also a little sort of bulletin pen thing, which is talking about what is happening in other comics around it.
Bullpen bulletins. So we had, at that time, we had Amazing Spider-Man 32. So we had the story of JMS was on Amazing Spider-Man at that time with John Romita Jr. with the Ezekiel stuff. Christopher Priest was in Black Panther. We had... what else? We had Kurt Busiek and Eric Larson on Defenders, Frank Thierry on Iron Man, and interestingly, we had the first issue of Garth Ennis and Steve Dillon's Punisher #1, the one-man army named Frank Castle, returns to renew his war against the scum of the earth. And Tom DeFalco was 35 issues into Spider-Girl, so some good stuff. Yeah, I mean, Jesus, actually some really good stuff.
Clearly a very good era for Marvel in general.
Yeah, so that's the context against which this was put out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that is sort of the setup and the history, a little bit of info on the creators themselves, what was going on around Marvel at that time. So we may as well jump into the book itself, and I'll just kick it off by giving the official synopsis for the book. So we'll chat the synopsis, then we'll do a deep dive. Pre-warned, once we hit deep dive, spoilers will be aplenty. And that's the one thing about a book club, guys. Anytime we do this, they will be spoiler heavy, because how else are you supposed to talk about it?
I mean, this was a book that was released a lot of years ago.
Yeah, almost as long ago as our last book club.
No, that's it. I mean, every day someone should be coming to this book. Someone, if you're listening to this pod and you've never read the book, I would suggest that you stop now and go down to Coffee and Heroes or whatever your local comic book store is, and buy the book, read it, and then come back to us.
And then come back to us.
We shall welcome you back with open arms.
So the official synopsis is: the measure of a man is not in how he gets knocked to the mat; it is in how he gets up. Those are the words blind attorney Matthew Murdoch's father lived and died by. Prizefighter battling Jack Murdoch's murder set in motion a chain of events that exploded with a new superhero swinging out of New York City's Hell's Kitchen, the blind acrobat Daredevil. Retelling of the early career of the man without fear, the Eisner Award-winning team of Jeph Loeb and Tim Sale, Spider-Man Blue, Batman Long Halloween, have taken an inspiring action-adventure story and blended it with a romantic comedy. The result, highlighted by Sale's dazzling ink washes, is the heartwarming and heartbreaking story of two young people in love, Matthew Murdoch and Karen Page. Collects Daredevil Yellow 1 to 6.
Yeah, great. So it was, that does it.
That does it.
So, and we're done.
So again, from here in, guys, there's going to be spoilers everywhere. We're going to be going through the issue. We're going to point out some of our favorite pages, some of our favorite dialogue, some of the structural issues throughout it, and just have a good little chat. And then we're going to finish that off after that by recommending some further reading if you are looking to get into the character of Daredevil, and why wouldn't you?
So, Daredevil Yellow, as we've said, was the first of these 4 colour books, which Alan is lucky enough to have in an omnibus edition, so Daredevil Yellow being the first of those. And it was part of the Marvel Knights imprint at Marvel, which was kind of a way of differentiating the cosmic heroes, the street level heroes. It was a way of saying this is maybe a wee bit grittier. Certainly it was at the start. It's a wee bit grittier than
Did Marvel Knights have an age recommendation on it?
It was the time, I think it was T+ or whatever it was. It was all for
sort of
teenage.
Plus,
yeah, absolutely. Those, after the Comics Code Authority sort of disappeared, those things were just sort of, they were what they were. And it was started by Joey Q and Jimmy P. So Joe Quesada and Jimmy Palmiotti.
Joe Quesada, a important Daredevil creator in his own right.
Absolutely. And at that time, the EIC in Marvel. He was the editor-in-chief. And those guys were, at that time, nicknamed the bad boys of Marvel. They were doing their own thing. And I think this particular, I think the series of stories, but I think this particular story was just a testament to what they did and what they wanted to do. So yeah, that's sort of the background of Marvel Knights and where that came from. And then, they obviously tagged Jeph Loeb for Daredevil.
It's interesting just thinking about that, in that the original Ultimate Spider-Man, was that around the early 2000s?
It was, yeah. So that was another one of Joey Q's, sort of, I think he hit that up and then it went where it went.
Yeah, so it started in 2000 and ended in 2009. So the reason I'm bringing that up is because I've heard Mark Miller talk about this, about how sometimes comics go in cycles of around 20 years in terms of like new talent coming through who are inspired by the previous talent. And if you look at Marvel of this era, so you've got your Marvel Knights stuff, you've got your Max comics, which would have been the likes of Punisher and stuff, you've got your Ultimate Universe. Now let's compare that to the success we see DC having in the last year with the Absolute line. with their Black Label line, which is a bit more adult as well. So what they're kind of doing is something very similar to what Joe Quesada and Jimmy Palmieri set up.
So similar, but so you had at that time you had the Frank Miller approach to Daredevil, the Alan Moore approach. Well, Alan Moore was well before that, but that sort of darkness had descended on the medium we love, and it defines an awful lot of the heroes that we know today. It defines the Punisher. It defines, you know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So, but that was, so Frank Miller's approach to Daredevil was grim, it was dark, it was gritty, it was Catholic guilt. It was hanging off. It was very, very much what Batman was leaning into at that time, because writer, hanging off,
and in some cases, same artist.
Yeah, absolutely, hanging off the the church gargoyles and representing, and so at that time, Bendis, he's recently come back to that actually with, what was the Masterpiece? Was doing the crime fiction thing, and Brubaker, as we know, is the master
of crime
fiction,
the godfather of crime.
Yeah, absolutely, and that, there's a swashbuckling aspect to that, to Masterpiece, which there was a swashbuckling aspect to that, and that's what they brought back to Daredevil. It was almost like they were working against the established, this is what this is, but this is what Daredevil was. So they almost took him back to where he was, and that, I think that's kind of where, whenever they brought Jeph Loeb and Tim Sale on board, that's sort of what they were going for. Would you agree?
I think they straddle the line really well with Daredevil Yellow, in that it's got that swashbuckling nature. It's got that someone who enjoys being a hero. That's what I always think about when I think of swashbuckling. It's someone who enjoys doing the right thing to bad people almost. But I still think there's a lot of noir in this as well.
Definitely, 100%. Wouldn't disagree with you.
The reason I say that is because you've got the boxer who's supposed to throw a fight. You've got the guy who's a fixer who is like, we'll put you up the ladder, battling Jack, but you got to take a dive when we say. You've got the darkness of Daredevil literally watching a man die on the train tracks because he's so unfit and he's so scared on the way.
Yeah. Oh,
and
that was.
And even the narration there is incredible, because he's like, don't you dare take a dive before I catch up to you, In a way, he almost feels robbed.
Okay. So
but we'll get to that in a second. But I think there's a lot of noir here. But what's really great about this book, and one of the reasons I think this is arguably their best work, is because it balances the playfulness of a couple of characters falling in love, getting to know each other. It balances that with the joy of being a superhero. There's one point where he's just riding down the railings of the New York subway with a big smile.
Okay, so yeah,
but it also has that darkness and noir. 100%. So the book balance is fantastic.
So think about the context in which Daredevil was created. So you had Peter Parker, Spider-Man, who was hated by the public, as a result of the Daily Bugle's daily tirades against him, and J. Jonah Jameson, who ironically is now his buddy, but at that time, Daredevil was lauded by the public. He was the hero of New York City, or Hell's Kitchen, or whatever.
Because he had Ben Urich.
Yeah, exactly. And
Ben Urich was championing Daredevil.
Yes, exactly. But Matt also enjoyed being Daredevil.
Yeah.
It wasn't a curse for him, whereas you could say that in some ways, with great power must come great responsibility. I have a responsibility to be Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Within his life, Matt was the blind lawyer who became a lawyer in order to avenge his father. But being the Daredevil was the release from that. That was the freedom where he didn't have to not pretend to be blind, because he is blind, but he didn't have to pretend,
that he couldn't sense environments.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's interesting though, because like Daredevil at his core is the biggest hypocrite in comics, because he's a man of the law. He's literally a lawyer. He believes in the law. He practiced it. He got his law degree, opened up, Nelson and Murdoch, all because his dad always said, you don't want to be a chump like me, get educated.
Yeah.
But then he realizes that New York at that time, and certainly in the Marvel version of New York, it's that corrupted places and at high levels with, Kingpin and with the Owl and all these kind of things, that he does have to take matters into his own hands.
So
that's why he's such an interesting character to me.
So
but it's also drenched in Catholic guilt about that.
Yeah. So can I disagree with you slightly? He doesn't believe in the law, he believes in justice.
Mm-hmm.
And the law doesn't always serve justice.
That sounds like an 80s action movie, doesn't it?
But is that not what Daredevil's built on?
It's a fair point. I mean, he believes in the law, otherwise he wouldn't practice it.
He practices the law in order to serve justice. And that's why.
To a degree, he believes in the law because not every case that he doesn't get justice. So he believes in the law.
100%. Yeah.
But then there's those ones where you see it in this with a slicked back lawyer with slicked back hair and Park Avenue lawyer, as he says, is able to get people out in a technicality.
Well, that's because the law is corruptible, but justice is not.
You should be an 80s action movie.
So he takes the law to serve justice as far as he can, and whenever the law can no longer serve justice, then he does it his own way. Jesus, I did it again. This
is just your DVD collection sitting here, just coming up and coming up.
But yeah, so the interesting thing is that Matt revels in being Daredevil. He loves being Daredevil. He in this 6 issues, in the first the first lot of issues of Daredevil, he was joyful. He was before the Daredevil we know and understand now, before the Catholic guilt took over, and that's no before that guilt took over, and that he was joyful. He was and he wore this almost garish yellow costume, and then in the comics, without notice, he suddenly was wearing this red costume.
Yeah.
Now his yellow costume is kind of red and yellow, but then he suddenly was in an all red costume.
Yeah.
And there was never any explanation. It just changed.
A bit like how the Hulk was grey and then he became green.
Yeah. So that is kind of where this story falls, is in that place where he was wearing the yellow costume and then he changes to the red costume, and the context of it is, so obviously we know the story of Karen Page. So Karen Page was the secretary who was recruited by Nelson and Murdoch very early on, who became their secretary, and then eventually she was the love of Matt's life. The unrequited love of Matt's life. She was also the love of Murdoch, of Foggy Nelson, and she eventually fell to drugs during the dark ages of comics during the 80s.
Yeah, she became an actress, and then the acting sort of rolled straight up. Then she ended up as a porn actress.
Yep.
And then a drug addict. And
if that's not an 80s storyline, I don't know what
and then we'll certainly get to that, because there's a lovely throwaway line in this. It's just a throwaway line in the book. If you don't know, you don't know. But it shows the deep dive knowledge that Jeph Loeb has of the history of Daredevil.
Yeah. And then following that, she ended up being killed by Bullseye in the moment that was formative moment in Daredevil's in Matt's life and in Daredevil's origin, which he's continued to. And it's kind of cool in that way, in that it's become something that's in some ways that's a modern moment. We often talk about comic characters always returning to their origins, status quo, and there are some moments in comics that they just once that's done, you can't go back.
Yeah, they define a character.
And
so it defines their motivations.
Yeah, 100%. So Spider-Man's origin was Uncle Ben is killed, great power. But then his second origin was Gwen Stacy dies.
Yeah.
So Matt's origin was
Death of his father.
Death of his father, but before that, it was the
accident.
being exposed, the accident that exposed him to radioactive substances that blinded him, but gave him extrasensory.
Yeah,
but then beyond that, it was Curran Page. So the whole concept of this is Matt's grieving.
Yeah.
So it's set in some ways. It's set in our modern day where he is writing a journal or a letter to
Karen that she'll never get to read because
exactly
in this era that he's writing it, she's already died. And,
she has,
and he makes many allusions to that by saying like, "Oh, you'll never read this," or "I couldn't save you," or that kind of thing. So it's framed as a bit of a tragedy from that.
100%. And Matt is the narrator of his own story here.
Yeah,
so he's writing it to Karen.
Yeah,
while she is dead, but he's writing it about the time she was still alive.
Yeah, because he's remembering that time, and those memories will never fade. So, but yeah, what's a cool thing about this book, I think, first of all, as well, is that because it's a standalone book, it would have been very easy to dedicate 10, 12, 14 pages to retelling those origin stories. It does none of that. There's literally a throwaway line here and there, which it's good enough to catch up sort of first-time readers. But I think at this point they trusted the readers that they knew the origin of Daredevil. They didn't need to sort of retell that. I love the format of it as well, as you were talking about it before, about how each chapter has its own sort of title. So there's 6 in total. So the first one is the championship season. The second is the measure of a man. The third is stepping into the ring. The fourth is Never Lead With Your Left. The fifth is Against the Ropes. And issue 6 is The Final Bell. And what I love about this format as well is that each issue is almost like a one-shot. It's, the first issue, Death of Battling Jack. Second issue, Death of the Fixer. Third issue, representing the Fantastic Four. Fourth issue, The Battle with Electro, which is something you weren't expecting at all.
Yep.
Fifth issue, Confrontation with the Owl. Sixth issue, Confrontation with Purple Man. But they all add up to one overarching narrative. But you could almost hand anybody any of these issues out of order and be like, there's a complete story.
The other thing is, though, issue 1, the first issue starts with 3 pages, that have Matt. 5 pages, my mistake. 5 pages that have Matt in the modern day in his current red costume, and it's they're bookends.
Yeah,
they're bookends. So you have him in his current red costume. It's all very dark. He's the only color. Red is the only color. It's the red of his costume, which of course is prescient in a book that's called Daredevil Yellow. So all the background is gray. Everything else is gray. He's the only color. He's got the stubble.
Yeah.
He's having a hard time. He's obviously going through a rough time, and it ends with him touching the Kid Murdoch poster, the poster of his father's first fight.
Yeah, it hangs in the gym that he used to train.
Yeah, absolutely. And then whenever we cut into the story on the 6th page, it's the result of that fight in the newspaper of that time. Kid Murdoch KOs Moore in 9. But then also in issue 6, after everything they've been through, it ends with the click of the Nelson and Murdoch door,
and
then we go back to our red Daredevil, but the background is white. Everything is light and white, and the
gym is no longer condemned.
The gym is no longer condemned. It's Battling Jack's gym. So I think that's beautiful. I think it's beautiful. And
symmetry is a big thing in this book.
Huge.
So you've got those bookends there. But I mean, you also mentioned the first sort of couple of pages. Every issue begins with a massive splash page, usually with 1 or 2 lines of narration.
Yep, brilliant.
And you turn the page and you get this gorgeous double page spread, usually showcasing Daredevil's ability. But it can be slightly different in each book. But it has that symmetry and that, you go to issue, 3, just as an example, as I turn to it there. The first page is this huge, big close-up of the thing breaking through
their door, their wall, and their window,
and calling them shysters. And then the double-page spread is this gorgeous double-page spread showing the whole of the Fantastic Four outside of Nelson and Murdoch. You know, you've got Karen Page looking shocked. You've got, you know, Foggy actually with a smile on his face going, oh, here come our first clients.
But all of the Fantastic Four displaying their powers, you know, and their looks from that period of time. And
they even showcase their entire personalities in that quick 2 pages. You've got Johnny saying, I think I finally found the thing's good side because he's got his butt sticking out the window. You've got the Invisible Woman, Sue Storm, going, Benjamin J. Grimm, we do not call them shysters. And then you've got, Reed Richards going back to the front door going, they do have a front entrance, guys.
And he's stretching his body from the Fantastic Car right the way around. Of those, so there's that's one of the motifs of this is you've got your first page, which is the 1-page splash page, and then you've got your 2-page splash page.
Mm-hmm.
Which was your favourite of those 1 or 2-page splash pages?
It's a tricky one, to be honest, because they're all really good. The Fantastic Four one definitely does have lightness of tone.
That 1-page splash page of Thing with his face through.
Yeah. I love that. I love the Electro one. I think is great as well.
I think that is one of the most perfectly balanced splash pages I have ever seen. You've got, because you know that whenever Tim Sale was drawing this, he knew that the page center was going to be in the middle.
Yeah,
but it's perfectly balanced.
Yeah,
with Electro on one side and Daredevil on the other side, and they both have the same weight, the same mass as characters. The machinery it just is, and even down in the bottom corners, you've got the shadows of the forefront machinery. I just think that is one of the most perfectly balanced pages,
and even just the dialogue as well.
Yeah.
Electro having ideas above his station where it's just like, you're hardly worth my time. I'm used to fighting Spider-Man, and that. Nothing gets Mac going like someone underestimating him. And he says several times, he's like, maybe I shouldn't have chased after him. He was just stealing some secrets to try and sell on, but hey ho, I'll go after him anyway. And that's a huge fight, which increases Matt's confidence.
And that's back to his father as well. That's that,
stay down, don't get back up.
Exactly, 100%.
I will say my favorite double splash page, though, of the whole book is in issue 1. And it's after Battling Jack knocks out the other guy in the boxing match. He's basically told to throw the fight, and he says no. And there's this great page where we've already established at this point that Jack is a southpaw, so in boxing terms that means his strongest hand's his left. And there's this page where it goes, unbelievable, southpaw Jack Murdoch has floored Creel with a hard right to the jaw. And you turn this double page spread.
The winner!
You've got, the winner by knockout, and you've got, Foggy and Matt cheering like crazy in the shadows from the side. You've got Jack looking magnificent and victorious. Creel knocked out. You can see the body language of the mobsters who are like, this is not what was supposed to happen. Just so much storytelling done in that 2-page splash. That's possibly my favorite sort of splash of the whole series. There's just so much going on it, and it's just gorgeously drawn.
I totally agree with you. I don't disagree with you, but you know what really vibes with me? Is that in the first issue, at the start of the first issue, I love, you remember the Nightwing issue that had us following him through the issue, just all, I love it when an artist can depict
movement,
Spider-Man's movement, or Nightwing's movement, or Daredevil's movement, and Tim Sale does that fantastically, and I think he does it deliberately. I don't know if you noticed, but at the start of the first issue, you have Daredevil in his red costume, and there's a double-page spread of him volleying off using the spring of a flagpole up here, and dropping down and dropping onto another flagpole and bouncing off it and flipping over. And then at the start of issue 2, so that's in his red costume. Start of issue 2, there's another spread of him doing the thing. He volleys through a window, smashes out the light because he doesn't need it. Launches his billy club, and it's almost, those issue 1 and 2 splash pages are almost twins. But at different periods of time, with the second issue being in the yellow
he even
costume.
brings it in again in issue 6. He's got Daredevil. At this point, they've been establishing that, Daredevil is loved by the city and all this kind of thing, but then the Purple Man turns some of the cops against him, and he's sort of bouncing past all of the cops, and they're like, so much for being the city's favorite son, they're shooting at him. So as you say, Sale was always one of those great artists at depicting movement. I mean, you go back even to what you were talking about with that electro fight. That electro fight is fantastic. It's choreographed so well. You can feel the speed and the accuracy of the fighting and all that stuff.
It's something I sort of, without in any way comparing myself to anyone else who can fight, but as someone who's trained in martial arts for 26 years, it's something that I really appreciate. I find myself
you've
going,
always picked out those details. We've talked about it a couple of times.
Yeah, where's that fist coming from? Where's it going to? Where's that?
How's their weight
how's
centered?
How's the body moving? How's their weight centered? Absolutely. It's very, very good. It's the
way Sale's able to capture that athleticism, it's just absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, we should talk a wee bit about what makes Tim Sale special as an artist. I mean, obviously, he's a fantastic artist, but what Tim Sale was known for, and Tim Sale passed away in...
It was a couple of years ago now. I think it was around 2020 thereabouts.
I think so.
2022, I beg your pardon.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, he was well known for his collaborations with Jeph Loeb. And he also collaborated with Jeph Loeb in Heroes on the TV series.
Yeah.
I mean, he very much influenced the modern depiction in cinema of Batman and all of that. But what he was really known for was his use of ink washes. So he used different he watered down different levels of ink in order to make different levels of greys, which were then very very ably coloured by Matt Hollingsworth. So those greys, so Tim Sale did that inking, and obviously you've got your inking of lines, but then you've got your washes. And that's what he was well known for. And then whenever Matt Hollingsworth, who I think they were very frequent collaborators, so whenever Matt Hollingsworth put the colour in that, then that made for a style that was almost like a watercolour. Yeah. And that's what you've got all the way through this. But sorry, I didn't mean to detract from what you were saying, but it's worth recognising.
And it's definitely worth bringing that up, especially I think one of the best examples of it is, as you say in issue 1, you've got scene set in the future, so it's much more darkness, Matt going through a dark time. Then you turn the page and it's all sort of lightness and color. But then the scene where Battling Jack is killed, Matt hears a gunshot, or does he? I love the narration. He's like, did I hear that or did I dream it? But I knew it was happening.
Yeah.
But you turn those couple of pages of him rushing to his dad's murder scene, all the cops are in black and white. All the street is in black and white, but Matt's in color because he's the one going through that pain.
And you wonder,
so the colors the colors are brilliant.
It's something that's always interesting in how Daredevil is depicted. As obviously he's a blind man, he has heightened senses in all ways. He has his radar sense, and there's different creators depict that in different ways, and it's always interesting to see how it's depicted. Also televisually, so the way they did it in the original Netflix TV series was good. The way they did it in the original Daredevil movie with Ben Affleck with the rain was kind of cool. We haven't seen it yet at all in Daredevil Born Again, but is that how they've chosen to depict it in this comic? We don't see any moments where he's
first person sort of viewpoints or whatever.
So, but we see him in color and everything else in black and white, and he can pick those things out. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and then obviously you've showcased the art. I mean, I think the writing is the reason these guys were so great together, is because the writing perfectly complements it. I mean, Jeph Loeb's got this sort of great hard-boiled narration. I know you're someone who misses thought bubbles.
Yeah.
But if you're not going to use thought bubbles, then this to me is how you do narration, because you know everything Matt is thinking about every single incident here
through this
device of writing the letter. That's a good way of finding a natural way to get into your story by making it in the form of that letter. But the narration the whole way through is fantastic. I mean, there's loads of little nods the whole way through it. When he discovers his dad's body, for example, he's like, all I really remember is the smell of Old Spice, my dad's blood, ... pistachio nuts. And that's going to pay off later. And I love 100%. The narration later of when he goes to watch him on death row, and he's like, I brought pistachio nuts to eat. Yeah. But he still can't take them out of his pocket. It's almost like he's petty, but he's not that petty.
Yeah, that didn't feel like Matt to me.
but but he
Yeah.
brings it straight back
That's
around.
what I mean.
think.
If he, you know, he had this petty idea of, well, I'll bring the pistachio nuts and I'll eat them while you're dying.
Yeah.
But that doesn't feel like our Matt. That doesn't feel like the Matt
Yeah,
we know.
I think Matt learns,
he's a higher individual. Like,
I think he learns a lot in that
Yeah.
moment as well, because he, again, going back to the narration, he talks about how, oh, I had to go to this. I thought it would just smell like it did with Electro during that fight. But obviously it's like charred flesh and it's a man being taken from the earth and all the rest. So he goes into it with this naive thought, but leaves with a different thought. And I think the pistachio nuts is the same thing.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this is a good thing to do, but oh wait, no, it's not.
So, I mean, the interesting thing here is, as well, throughout the whole 6 issues, is Matt is coming at this as a narrator after Karen has been killed by Bullseye, and also after she has done the thing she did as a heroin addict under Frank Miller. And one of those things that she did was, well, do you think during this that Karen knew at any point that Matt Murdock was Daredevil?
There's 1 or 2 occasions where he's close to her. He does say, I didn't even think about it in that moment, but did she maybe recognize the dimple in my chin? Did she hear the pitch in my voice, even though I lowered it like superheroes should do?
Yeah, should do, yeah.
So there's definitely breadcrumbs there. There's a moment where Daredevil goes past their window and she's like taken aback, and then Matt walks in literally like a couple of seconds. Like, the thing is, they consistently saying this about how Matt and Foggy are a little slow to realize things, but but she's very sharp.
Yeah,
she is not stupid at any time.
Definitely not.
But there's lots of time where they go, oh, Foggy and I both ignored that this could only end one way, and heartbreak and so forth. But yeah, that thing you're talking about that Karen does later for, where she basically sells Matt's identity for a shot of heroin.
Yeah.
That's even alluded to in this. It's in issue 5. And there was a character in it called Grace who was sent by the Owl to basically hire Nelson and Murdoch, because the idea was, oh, the blind lawyer gets loads of sympathy from the jury. Do you know how good it is to have someone like that in your pocket?
Yeah.
And Owl, living up to his name, of course, has Karen in a bird cage. And Grace is there and she's shouting down saying, help me. And what Grace says, you don't understand. Someday you'll have a secret and you'll see how much it's worth to you.
Yeah.
And that's a deep cut.
I didn't even think about that, Alan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Class.
That is just essentially talking about Karen revealing a secret, and again, see Daredevil Born Again by Frank Miller and Mazzucchelli.
Absolutely.
So again, it just shows the deep knowledge that Jeph Loeb has in this book.
And it links those 2 series just perfectly
together.
Unbelievable. Yeah, very, very good.
Yeah, so just the whole way through it, there's just a couple of wee small things just to throw in that I noticed, without diving too much deeper into it. But issue 3, there's a great scene where 3 kids try to beat up Matt outside of a bar.
That was brilliant.
And I was like, Matt could give Cap a run for his money in terms of shield throwing, because he uses the dustbin lid.
Yeah.
And he basically runs around like
I could do this all day. Yeah.
Pretty much. Karen Page's introduction. This really reminds me, I don't know if you know the movie well or not, but my favorite movie of all time is a movie called Rear Window. It's James Stewart and Grace Kelly. Karen Page is Grace Kelly in this. That introduction is Grace Kelly.
And it's so funny because in the version of the book I have, Jeph Loeb says that's exactly what
does he say that?
Yeah, he does.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Because that's not in my book. I think we said about obviously having different editions. So Keith's has a foreword by Jeph Loeb. Mine has a foreword by Tim Sale. And I just straight away thought, like, this is Grace Kelly. And then I wondered if that is why they used the name Grace for the Owl's Messenger as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just trying to find that particular point of view.
It's always nice when you think something and then it's proven, pretty quickly as well. What else did we notice? Yeah, little details in the art I think are worth pointing out as well. There's a great, just tiny detail I noticed in issue 4 where Matt, Karen, and Foggy go bowling. And, Foggy's wearing this bowling shirt. And, he's always trying that little bit too hard. And then when Matt and Karen are sort of pushing up against each other. He's making sure he's writing the scores down and trying to not pay attention to it, because again, they're all living in denial of this little love triangle that's going on, and that all comes down again to Tim Sale's art as well.
Let me just read this for you, just to harken back to what you were saying. As with many young men who read comics, Tim and I shared our fondness for Karen and sighed at our inability to win the heart of someone we both saw being played by Grace Kelly.
Awesome. That makes me so happy. A couple of little other things. Battling Jack Murdoch, he lays the groundwork for the idea of the man without fear, because he says you can do anything if you're not afraid. But
also it was Karen that christened Daredevil and this as, so you're, and man whenever he pulled her out of the Owl's cage, and he couldn't, he bent apart the bars because he could sense where the weak points in the bars were, so he could pull them apart. Yeah. And you're not scared. Oh no, and she christened him the man without fear. And anyway, continue.
It's just little details I love pointing out. Foggy's hurt at the end of issue 5, just fantastic storytelling. He's walking up to the office with flowers, and he's already told Matt he's going to propose, and then he sees them sort of dancing almost, and the final page is like 3 different panels of Foggy walking out of the building,
and dropping the flowers.
Just amazing storytelling.
There's a note to friendship there as well, and
well, I love that even in the next issue, because Foggy's like, look, you can have her. He's basically like, look, I'll respectfully step back. You're my friend. I've thought about hitting you. I've thought about, shouting at you. There's no point. We are friends for life.
Yeah. Despite the fact that, to Karen's credit, she didn't ever seem to give Foggy an indication.
Yeah, because Foggy consistently says, like, she'll always call him Mr. Nelson. Yeah. It's like, no, that's Foggy. And she never calls him until the very, very end.
And by the end of it, they're calling each other Mr. Nelson and Mr. Murdoch, because she's calling them Foggy and Matt. But and then, I mean, for me, the trick of this is that, again, it's those bookends of we start with Daredevil's costume that we're all familiar with, and we end with Daredevil's costume that we're all familiar with, the red costume. The book's called Daredevil Yellow, but we've never, as we said whenever we started, we've never had an indication of why that changed. It just changed. It just changed suddenly. Yeah. But we find out the reason in here why he changed from the yellow costume to the red costume.
Well, if nothing else, Matthew Murdoch Esquire is easily led by women. This is something you will see over decades of storytelling. But yeah, it's basically Karen suggests he should wear red. I mean, devil is in the name. So of course he listens, and doesn't take too long to that. I loved the little deep cut as well. Obviously, when Daredevil first came out, it wasn't called Daredevil #1. It was called Here Comes Daredevil #1.
Well, it's the same as the Invincible Iron Man or the Incredible Hulk.
And there's just this great scene with the Purple Man, where the Purple Man is about to seduce Karen, and someone knocks at the door. And I love the way they have the accent for Purple Man as well. It's like, you might want to cover it up, love, while I tip and then Matt bursts through the door as Daredevil and then shouts, "Here comes Daredevil."
Which is also the first page of the first issue.
The first page of the first issue.
Here comes Daredevil.
And then just the last thing I want to throw out a bit of love for is, I mean, we do see it in the collected edition, obviously, because they include it, but this is something you would have definitely enjoyed in the single issues. The covers are one long story. It's every cover tells a story. Matt growing up as the specter of Daredevil always looms above him. So, issue 1, he's walking down the street with his dad. He's a young boy. When you get then to issue 2, we have Matt training in the gym not long after his dad has passed away. In fact, is that Matt training in the gym? Yeah, it is Matt training in the gym. Then by the time you get to issue 3, I believe it's, them getting ready to open Nelson and Murdoch, which is called Stepping into the Ring. By the time you get then to issue 4, it's Matt arguing a case in court. By the time you get to issue 5, it's Matt on the courthouse steps walking out, and then issue 6 is Matt and Karen together. So the covers themselves tell a lovely story of Matt growing up and, becoming Daredevil, so to speak. So, and all of course done by Tim Sale and Matt Hollingsworth on colors. So this just seems like a series, and maybe further down the line we should do it with Spider-Man Blue and Hulk Grey and Captain America White, but the amount of care and attention to detail that goes into this book is why it rises to the top of their best work for me. Like, I love Long Halloween, but I've read this twice in the last couple of days, and it just puts a big sloppy smile on my face reading it.
Do you feel you need to have an understanding of... Let me rephrase that. I feel like you need to have an understanding of the fate of Karen in order to really get the emotional resonance of this book.
I think what is really clever about it is that it's a one and done. You know she dies, but you don't know how. So it literally tantalizes you and teases you to, would you like... It's almost the Starship Troopers thing. Would you like to know more? I think it tells a brilliant story. You know there's a tragic end for Karen. I think you do...
I loved seeing her like this.
Because that's the thing. So many people's memories of Karen is because of that ultimate betrayal. Is everyone thinks it's like, oh, she's just some, drug addict who, screwed Matt's life over and this and that. So to see her in this, full of hope, young, falling in love, was wonderful. I do think, like any great story, you will get more from it the more detail you know, but I do think it stands alone on its own. This is a tragedy of a story. They convey it enough through the art, they convey it enough through the narration. Something tragic happens, but Matt wants to remember happier times.
Yeah, absolutely. So, or at least needs to deal with his grief.
Yeah.
This is a story of Matt dealing with his grief.
Yeah, processing his grief 100%. And, and learning to forgive himself.
Yeah.
For it.
Which he never does.
He never does. That Catholic guilt never goes away. But yeah, I mean, if you do enjoy this and you want to get into Daredevil more, we definitely have a few recommendations. I mean, the thing is, I say this to people in the store all the time. I think Daredevil, again, this is just my opinion. Keith Mayer may not agree. For me, Daredevil has the best unbroken run of quality writers in comics history. It goes from Frank Miller to Ann Nocenti to Brian Michael Bendis to Ed Brubaker to Andy Diggle to Mark Waid to Charles Soule to Chip Zdarsky to Saladin Ahmed. That covers almost 5 decades.
Actually, whenever you say it like that, it's hard to argue with.
It covers nearly 5 decades of storytelling.
Of that absolute murderer's row of talent.
This is where we disagree.
Yeah, 100%. What would you?
For me, it's Mark Waid. For me, it's Mark Waid, and for the simple reason that Mark Waid was my introduction to Daredevil.
Right.
I get into Marvel comics around the early 2010s. And I wasn't reading Avengers. I wasn't reading Spider-Man. I wasn't reading Fantastic Four. I was reading Dan Slott's Silver Surfer. I was reading G. Willow Wilson's Miss Marvel. I was reading Matt Fraction's Hawkeye. I was reading Kelly Sue DeConnick's Captain Marvel. And I was reading Mark Waid and Chris Samney / Paulo Rivera's Daredevil.
Sure.
So that got me into it. But I have now read what I believe is your favourite run, which is?
Brubaker and Lark. Whenever you put those two guys together, I mean, Ed Brubaker needs no introduction in this parish. Michael Lark, the artist, absolutely phenomenal. Again, probably needs no introduction in terms of Lazarus and different bits and pieces. But so they... Obviously, Ed Brubaker is the crime writer of comics. And, he's excelled in that genre. And they had that pair, Brubaker and Lark, had the very tricky task of continuing on from Bendis and Alex Maleev.
Yeah.
So they started off where Daredevil was imprisoned and he was in jail. He was being tormented by the Kingpin, and they had him up against his murderers of villains, and we always talk about, a hero is defined by their villains, and Daredevil has some great villains.
Yeah.
Some real nasty gets.
Even if he stole one of them off Spider-Man.
Absolutely, But, so he starts off against all of them in jail without all of his usual advantages. And it just goes from there. It's just this pulse-pounding prison escape. And, it's a lot of that is in season 3 of the Daredevil show. But yeah, they are fantastic. They ran for, I think, about 40 issues, 82 to 119.
Yeah, it covers 2 omnibuses.
And they had Daredevil 500 as well, didn't they?
The reason I love the Mark Waid run so much, and it's maybe one of the reasons why I value this so highly as well, is I thought Mark Waid got the balance of lightness with darkness On reading the Ed Brubaker run, it is incredible, but holy good God, it is without hope. It is so dark.
And
Matt is put through the ringer in that series, to say the least, to the point. Think about where he's left at that series, and Shadowland is the next step.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, but it's amazing storytelling. But Wade, for me, like, there was one issue of Mark Wade's Daredevil. It was literally Silver Surfer came to town, and Daredevil jumped on the board with Surfer.
Away he went.
It's just fun, you know what I mean? But it balanced that with the darkness. There was some amazing Purple Man storytelling in it. For example, Matt ended up in San Francisco in the second volume from Wade and Samney. But and then that's a team that, you know.
Yeah, I trust. I mean,
that's another team that's coming together.
You've read Bendis Mac-and-Believe, have you?
I've read that as well. Yeah.
I mean, that was
very character defining as well.
That was character defining in that, you know, it was a redefinition in what way? You know, it was, you know, a kid obsessed with Daredevil, and the thing was David Mack's art was kind of watercolors.
Yeah.
Which brings us back to Tim Sale again.
Yeah.
And Daredevil Yellow, you know, so it was, and that really defined Ben Urich as a supporting character, and
brought in Echo.
Yeah, 100%, which has become another character defining.
Yeah.
Another character defining. But I can't argue with what you say about.
I think almost every run has been character defining. That's what is so amazing about it. I mean, I go back to we spoke to Chip Zdarsky, who of course his run's fantastic as well. When we spoke to Chip about it, and
Devil's Reign, which is part of the new Daredevil Born Again series.
So he said that he would never write Spider-Man, and the reason for that is because Spider-Man is so micromanaged, because that's Marvel's golden boy.
Of course it is. He's the flagship character.
And maybe,
even if it doesn't seem like it sometimes.
And maybe things are changing now because Daredevil's getting more and more attention. But Zdarsky said, in my second issue, Daredevil kills a guy by accident, and he has to face up to the, you know, what happens as a result of that. And he was like, imagine I pitch Spider-Man kills a guy. That's not going to happen. It's almost like Marvel saw Daredevil as a secondary character, so they said to every creator, you go nuts.
You know what is really interesting about that is, do you remember whenever Daredevil killed a guy and Spider-Man came for him, and Daredevil was waiting for Spider-Man, and he was through his senses was feeling Spider-Man coming, and was feeling his heartbeat, and was feeling his musculature and everything else, and he effectively went, he's the best of us.
Yeah.
You know, so
he's always held back.
Yeah. Everything, you know, so anyway.
But yeah, no, I mean, I mentioned all those quality writers. Daredevil's had a quality amount of artists through the years as well. David Mazzucchelli, John Romita Jr., Paulo Rivera, Chris Samney, Marco Cicchetto, Alex Maleev, David Mack, Michael Lark, more and more. But yeah, 3 books just to throw your way just for further reading, if you don't, you know, read the entire saga. 3 big ones, definitely Daredevil Born Again, Frank Miller, David Mazzucchelli. That of course links to Daredevil Yellow. We had mentioned about Karen's big secret that she lets out. You've got Daredevil Guardian Devil, which was written by Kevin Smith with art by Joe Quesada. Great self-contained book as well. And then the other one I would throw out is Daredevil Man Without Fear. There's that man Frank Miller again, but this time with John Romita Jr. So, but if Daredevil Yellow is now sounding like the greatest book in the world, we will have plenty of copies of it in store at all time. This will become a book that, as much as possible, will be a cornerstone, a mainstay, and always present in Coffee and Heroes, because it is that damn good.
Damn good.
And it was wonderful to talk about it. I thought we'd struggle for half an hour. I should really know better, Keith. But that was tremendous fun to go through, and now I just really want to go home and watch Daredevil Born Again.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you should. Yeah, that was great, Craig. It was a pleasure rereading this for you guys.
Yeah.
An absolute pleasure, and a great to have an excuse, despite the fact I've got a 30-issue pull list this week to get through.
That's why it can be hard to do book clubs sometimes, because obviously Keith and I read so much, but you look at the rich history of comics, there's so many gems there. Yeah. So we're always happy to take suggestions for book clubs if you guys ever want to reach out. We're looking at maybe doing a few in the future with maybe 1 or 2 guests from the store as well who have suggested books.
Yep.
Because it is really good just to focus in on one book. But yeah, as ever, guys, thanks for listening. Really hope you enjoyed this. Really hope you'll discover Daredevil Yellow at some point if you haven't already. And I look forward to seeing you in the store.
Good night.
So I've been Alan Taylor, and this has been Keith Miller.
You can find Alan in store at Coffee and Heroes most days, and on Twitter, where Alan is Coffee and Heroes 1 and I'm Ascanisun00. Coffee and Heroes is a local comic book store, coffee shop and community hub in Northern Ireland, based at Smithfield Market in the centre of Belfast.
You can also find Coffee and Heroes on Facebook and Instagram, or email us at coffeeandheroes@hotmail.com. Make sure to check out our YouTube channel as well.
Coffee and Heroes podcast is available on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts and through all good podcast platforms. Please like and subscribe and leave a review so more people can find us.
And until next time, happy reading and hope to see you in store soon.